Well, welcome to this week's episode of Claw Convos. We're here with Claira Janover, a 22-year-old Harvard student and part-time social media activist and influencer. So Claira, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm fairly new to the entrepreneur world. I think that I've always been much more of the Olivia Pope than the president of the White House. I much have preferred to go into existing industries or businesses or companies or orgs and really help and motivate. And it's been very new being on the front line, and entrepreneurship is such a trailblazing experience that's really high reward, but also really terrifying if you've never really done things like start a business or start anything from scratch. There's so much interdisciplinary knowledge that needs to be known. And so I'm here to chat and learn from you guys, and happy to talk about anything.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're really excited.
Hey guys, this is Sheila and Maya Dunn, and you're listening to Claw Combos. Let's get it done, bitches.
So just to get us started, can you tell us a bit about kind of just your story the past year, or just, I don't know, how things have changed for you since everything with.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. I don't think that I don't think I ever would have wanted this for myself or expected it for myself, but it's a really exciting opportunity. But basically, downloaded TikTok during COVID when the whole world was shutting down in March and April, and then just started to make content, and pretty quickly realized that my more dry sense of humor and sarcasm was going to be taken a lot more literally and a lot more at face value, but also kind of appreciated, especially in the activism world, where we're making fun of, for me at least, making fun of bigotry was really fun, but didn't really see the window into consequences of everything that you say could be blown out of proportions and taken out of context. It was a very rapid learning. It was a very good life lesson, but a very public and scrutinizing one. And so basically over the course of about a week from June 30th to July 7th, was basically being part of essentially a Republican smear campaign on Twitter, news media outlets, and social media. I was also being very supported and uplifted by a lot of people as well on various social media apps, but it was very disorienting. I was also alone at the time. And since then, I've sort of just, the question becomes, what would you do if you woke up with 500,000 followers that you didn't have the week before? What would you do if now your name was associated with either tremendous activist plight, or just complete dismemberment of your character? And that's sort of the ground that or the room that I've been occupying.
Mhm.
And questioning, I'm currently on a semester off. I start back full time on my last semester in the spring, beginning in late January. But I've had all this off time, and so I've been really exploring the world of social media, which I never would have otherwise. And the reality of social media is that it's the fastest growing market and industry, but it's marketing human behavior, and it's marketing algorithms of essentially engagement, right? And it's personalizing it in a way that's really fascinating and frightening and overwhelming. And that's what I've been doing, and trying to shift out of necessarily content creation and more into utilizing the experience knowledge that I have, and doing it more sustainably. I think off camera.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting right now with TikTok and with the pandemic, and how TikTok is able to facilitate these crazy changes in following so quickly, that I don't think we've really seen a social media platform be able to do in the past nearly as much, at least in my opinion. So it is crazy to hear some of these stories of just overnight things blowing up, and how people can take the opportunity from them. I think is just really important and interesting to see. I have no experience with it at all. So um,
How many followers are you up to on TikTok?
Like 470 something thousand. It's crazy. I mean, there's huge growth potential in terms of like anything you do can go viral, and it's great, it's fun, but also everything that you do is entirely out of context. And then when you become a figure, right? Like if you have a story that people know of, you no longer become like the funny person or the political person. You become like who you are making TikToks. And that's a lot of responsibility and reach. And it's also a confusingly like, narcissistic place to be, because you don't know who knows you as like Claira Janover, the activist, or crazy Harvard girl, and who knows you as literally just a random on their For You page, right? And it's very complicated because, you know, it's a minute at most, typically 15 seconds, to somehow either not care about that background information and context, or go out of your way to explain yourself and like try to prove or demonstrate that you're like being sarcastic, even though you're not like saying like I'm being sarcastic, things like that, which is new. And I mean, it's something that I think the world of entrepreneurs is really fascinated by, because it's so hard to understand TikTok or to understand how to grow on TikTok unless you're a creator, right? But to be a creator takes such a large amount of time that most companies, corporations, and businesses are just like, you know what, either we're going to pay TikTokers to do their thing and get insight from them sort of as like a medium, right? Or like, we're just not going to touch it, even though there's the highest potential risk of like the organization, right? So I don't know if you guys have heard of like TikTok for Biden, but it was like this thing that it was made in like a week, and then in like 2 weeks got 1 million followers, and now it, you know, has grown into this huge thing. And we're working on creating a C4 organizational status, and I'm the COO of that. And that's my second experience in being like essentially the manager of like a project, but that's going to be an organization. And it's something that I've worked on so many campaigns and organizations, but I've never thought about like, what would it have been like to actually like register the organization and do what it needs and have the insight and have the risk, et cetera. But I think about that, and it's like, you look at the analytics of it, which again, depersonalizes what TikTok is. Like it goes from just like making videos to being like, when are my users on, et cetera, et cetera. And it games that. And it's finding a medium in that. And I think that like as a creator, I can't like create authentic content while like also analyzing and interpreting data. And I think that that's why it's very difficult to find the medium between like authentic branding and marketing and content creation. But YouTube and Instagram have really kind of mastered it. And so now TikTok is the one that I think industries are starting to explore more, but it's pretty frightening. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have not to the extent of your experience, but when I was in 8th grade, I started an Instagram account, and not overnight, but within about 3 or 6 months, I had 200,000 followers. And this was really early on days of Instagram. So companies also weren't really on it or using it. And they didn't even have like an insights tab. Like you could get some information, but yeah, it becomes very strategic, and like when you post, what time you post, who is your audience. And I was able to, monetize it, work with different companies as sort of like an influencer, and you come into all of this new power and quote unquote influence. But I agree that it's with TikTok being it has been around for actually like a good amount of time, but it is relatively new. And yeah, there's a challenge of how businesses can use it in the best way. Is that something?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's like ultimately the ideal org or group or coalition would be able to do both, but the amount of time required, like we don't really think of social media as time consuming because it's about us. It's like the equivalent of texting people, right? And then to try to look at it from a bigger picture, like I realized how much of my time was spent like just interpreting the engagement, reading the comments, right? I've never considered anything of what I've done on TikTok to be a business, right? Like I've sort of just been posting. I also stopped reading comments after a while just because like the uniqueness of my platform is that it's very negative sometimes, but it also just became, oh wait, everything about social media became me, right? I like did not watch TikToks of other people. I didn't watch my friends' posts on Instagram. And I think that for me, that was a very sad way to live on what's supposed to be like a connecting, bridging, and like universally just accessible place to be like, I went and got food today, or like I did this. And I think that I miss that. Like I kind of miss the way that Instagram used to be more like Facebook, and now everything is just very business driven because it's very successful. Like Facebook ads single-handedly changed the entire political landscape of
Yeah,
campaigning
right.
in
Yeah.
2008, right? But then we're sort of in this place of like, oh, okay, well now the learning curve is so much faster. No one knows what to do, because like the amount of things that have changed from like March to now with TikTok in comparison to like when TikTok first grew in like 2019 versus like the way that the world just existed in February before the pandemic is so fast paced, and there's like no time to understand that and to keep doing it and to not feel like you're just a machine of
Yeah.
narcissism.
Yeah. How do you, so that's a very interesting thing. It's like something that I work with a lot in just the world of marketing, but it's like your personal brand. How do you be
Stay true
authentic?
to it.
Yeah.
But also, you know, you have to play to these like algorithms almost. Is that what you were?
Yeah, that's where I was going. But also just like when people are scrolling through their feed and they see a TikTok from you, they, and something you wrote a lot about is like shaping your identity and how you, where do you go now? Because there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of uplifting people and people supporting you. And then you have, of course, we can get into this as well too, but just the hate, the negativity, the crazy comments as well. And you have this, and that's built to your platform. But yeah, how do you utilize that to grow? Do you kind of move from that? Where do you want to like go with your brand?
I mean, that's a good question. And it's something that I never would have thought about. Like I grew up watching like interviews of celebrities, and I'm not a celebrity by any means, but like at this smaller level, I'm a celebrity in comparison to where I was even in June, where like my TikTok was just funny, but it didn't intersect with my identity at all. Like it was like I wasn't marketing it. Like I wasn't trying to grow. I had a following of like 100,000 solely just because I had fun, but
Yeah.
I wasn't like follow my Instagram, brand deals, etc. Like I was really just kind of there. And then all of a sudden it's like all of a sudden I'm a figure, and it's like brave and courageous, but it's also profitable. And I think a lot of the past couple of months has been experimenting, and I'm very fortunate that I, knew from the beginning that I didn't want to be a business. I knew from the beginning that one, I wouldn't have the benefit of the doubt to be like the next Emma Chamberlain, the next like Charlie, because my fame revolved around an opinionated, outspoken nature of myself, right? And two, it just, the climate is very different now. The climate of activism, even though I've been a lifelong like activist. I really wasn't the person in college who was like at the top of cafeteria tables, like yelling at people. I was much more just like an invigoratedly outspoken student in class. And that was my way of learning. And I think the more and more that I entered this world of like having to explain myself all of the time and having to provide context, realizing that the only people really who knew any part of my life before June that wasn't disseminated via news media was myself and my friends. And that's a very, very, like, it really is just triggers an identity crisis, right? Because you're like, everyone knows me as this person that I am, right? But like with no context and no background. And integrating that is really complicated for someone like me who has a very complex background, right? Like almost always creative onus is on creators, and it's like no man's land. There's no infrastructure. All of it is privatized and personalized. Like there's no equivalent of like the FBI on TikTok, right? It's like all run by the app. And so there's no one saying like, you can't exploit TikTokers. You can't like so many people, because it's a new world, right? Like when a company says like, I'll send you this free thing for a video, you're like, oh my God, that's so cool. It never occurs to you until you hear from other popular creators that you should be getting paid, right? Because the standard of normalcy and like bartering is just very different. And it's
Yeah.
very counterintuitive to like living your life, you know? It's like the whole point of relationships in general is like, if your sister was like, oh my God, I just did this thing, you would be like, oh shit, I want to story that, you know, but like you wouldn't charge her, you know, and like then
Mhm.
all of a sudden to exist in this world where like you're not really a relationship to anyone, you're you know, a commodity or like a means to promote, etc. Like it's really challenging to navigate, and there's no answer, and it's very much contingent on every person. But I think that's where I am, is like I really want to uplift things like Clovo brand, right? I've had so much fun working for them, but that's also been like a very personal experience, you know, in comparison to my other brand deal, which was very much just like, here you go, here's what you need, post, and then update us.
Right.
Um, and then I think that that's the difference between promoting entrepreneurship and promoting industries. And
Right.
that's yeah, been
Yeah.
what I've been thinking.
No, yeah, you bring up, this is something we wanted to talk a little bit about, is sort of the pros and cons of having this newfound platform. It's, you know, you have, which people see the upside of it, but then there's a lot of struggle of like how to maintain relationships with people and not just be seen as like a money making machine, like that you used that word earlier, is like how can you keep your voice and stay true to yourself and also, right, have this identity that's separate from just the, you know, your social media. So what are some of the, like, what would you like to do with 500,000 followers? Like, what is something on the bright side now, like, that you want to communicate and have an impact on?
I mean, interestingly enough, I feel like I've been in the same state of questioning since like early July, now in December, of like, what do you want to do? And for
Mhm.
me, like not deleting the video, not deleting my platform, duetting people who had uplifted me, writing an article was just so like, it's the only thing that I can do to defend myself without making it about me, but showing that I had a story. And then since then, it's been this very confusing arena of, okay, well, I spent basically all of July and August doing activist content, doing activism. And it was basically just like a response. Like it was just like a very natural for me response, like, okay. But it became very, you know, confusing because like I don't live my life waking up every day being like, what am I going to politicize and how am I going to do it in a video? And then, you know, I think in August was really what really catapulted this like huge, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, because part of me was like, okay, well, I like the idea of being known for me. And then started integrating the TikTok that I had before I blew up of just like funny but candor and like trite commentary, and then realizing why am I doing this? Like what is, like, even if it gets likes, you know, or whatever, even if I'm potentially getting paid, like what at the end of the day is the benefit of being liked on social media?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that was something that I've been thinking a lot now, because it's like, yes, I do have so many more followers above average, right? But then, you know, it's also just like, I don't know why I would use it other than like quote unquote responsibly, right? So it's like, should I only make content that's like activist oriented or even just like information dissemination? And sometimes I've been like, yeah, you know, like remove me from the equation and just have it be like the fact that I'm intelligent. Similarly to like if you were doing like educational YouTube videos, you know, like you don't need to do like a day in my life vlog, you know, but I was kind of trying to merge them all, and it was really confusing and really not unsuccessful, but just really confusing. And so I'm in a place now where like I I'm still obviously like on TikTok and Instagram, but every day I have like, I set like a limit, like a time limit. So I set like an hour limit for like social media a day. So I'll like delete and reload the apps, which at this point I feel like the more that I explain it is like, wow, this doesn't sound healthy, like a healthy relationship with an app. But it's something that I get to do things like promote Clovo and like stand up for people, but not in a way that I'm like investing my life into it, in a way that I felt like TikTok was before. I made phenomenal friends. I was uplifted by so many people on social media. But at the end of the day, like, I personally, and this I think is what anyone with any amount of fame has to think, is like, do you want the fame just because it's fame, or do you want the fame because you want the lifestyle? And I don't want the lifestyle. But I want, you know, it is valuable. Like, it's great being able to share your story or information. But I've been, you know, I think trying to transition like my Instagram back into just like, I'm Claira, you know, and much more like I'm just a person, and less like I'm becoming this influencer. And then TikTok ideally would just be sort of something that I like wane off of, but utilize much more intentionally, to like direct the immense amount of traffic that you get with 500,000 followers, right? Like, you have that huge foundation of in you know, engagement. So then whatever you do already has a platform. And I think that that has been something like utilizing a platform
Yeah.
is something that I see what I want to do with like TikTok in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You can go in any direction really. And it's such, you know, I think it would be well, you know, and I don't know anything about this.
No, I'd love to. I mean, yeah, feel
I
free
think
to.
it would be, you know, a good time to really like figure out exactly what it is without pressure of having to create every single day tons of
Yeah.
content, or do all these different brand deals. Just take the time to figure out the direction. You know, like the podcast that you want to start, you know, now you'll have that elevated
Yeah.
platform to launch something like that. And that was sort of what I found myself. I actually ended up selling my Instagram account because I just didn't have the time, which is great.
Yeah.
Like, people never hear of someone selling their account, but I did, because I was making some money from like as an influencer, and didn't have the time to keep up doing. I started it for fun, and I had no
Yeah.
intention of it growing to the extent that it did. However, just from in hindsight, um I learned a lot from it. I definitely don't have any regrets about it, but it definitely gave me, I keep saying the word influence, but it gave me this power, this thing that I could do something with. So I think
Mhm.
it's great. I think, you know, the world, you have endless opportunities to go wherever you want. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, it is an interesting thing that you don't necessarily think about, is like, where do you want to go? Because that does partly define at least what people think of when they think of Claire Janover.
And I think to a point that you made earlier, like with the business side, it's like even just starting this podcast, and this is nowhere near like content creation or like intense like influencer status, but it gives you a new respect for the people in the creator side that I think the average person who's just scrolling on TikTok doesn't really fully know, to the extent of the
Yeah.
time it takes and the like business side of it, because there really is an entrepreneurship side to a creator. So it's just really interesting too.
Yeah, and I think being a creator, I think it's stigmatized in a way that like simultaneous people are like, get that bag, like do what you need, but also it's like a faux pas. It's still very much like how we're transitioning as a society into like mental health awareness, but still people don't want to be like, I'm going to therapy, I'm on meds, like things like that I think is even me like trying to process the fact that I feel this like shame that I'm famous on like TikTok. That's like a weird thing for me to say, and I find myself qualifying it a lot more than I would if I were like, I'm a YouTuber. And I think also like, and you know, this is like a very shitty thing about social media, but it's so addicting, but it's also so rapid and fast paced that like, you know, it always feels like what you have to do now. So I've had these huge spiraling moments of like, I need to delete all my accounts so I never have access to them again, so that I'm not pressured and compelled to like go on it and spend and waste my time. And then it's like, no, you don't want to do that, delete the app, you know. But then it's like, okay, I've been off the app for a day, that should mean something, when in reality a day without social media should not be something that's so intentional. But it very much, it has all of the same physiological and neurochemical, you know, if not more, right, resemblances to addiction, but in a way that's not influenced by a substance, but influenced by legitimate neuroprogramming that social media does. And this is, I mean, creds to social media, but they make everything so user friendly because they make it for you, literally. It's like trying not to get addicted to having a robot that already knows you do everything that you want, and then you get the validation for it. It is an episode of Black Mirror that we don't really think about. And I'm not one of those like, go into the woods, never communicate with people on social media, it's terrible people. But it is like, once you're in it, you have to be very intentional to step away from it. And I think the issue is not really necessarily like whether or not you have a social media. It should be like what your relationship is with it. But now, like, I'm in a very unique position where like my unhealthy relationship with social media is like, you have an audience, and it's so hard to not be like, oh, I have an audience, like I should post, even if it's like for you, right? Like even if it's dumb Emma Chamberlain-esque stuff, it's so tempting to just want to post and people be like, that's so cool, you know? And there is value in creativity, right? Like if I had somehow gotten a huge break and been the director of a movie that even like just was like slightly successful, it would be very difficult for me to step back and say like, do I want to be a director, you know? And so I think that there are a lot of like, when I hear people who have had an experience of either intentionally or unintentionally growing on a social media platform, the experience of thinking intentionally online, even if you're not getting hate, or even if you're just looking pretty or being smart or being exciting or goofy, like there's just a lot of thought into how people see you. And that's a very, very different way of living than the average person. And the psychology of that, I think, is something that's like amazing to me. And like, I could think about it forever. And I think I want to think about it for a while, but you need time to be able to think about it, you know, like, and there's so many cliches of like, just go outside without your phone for an hour. Like, I didn't realize how difficult that is unless I'm like with somebody else. And so like living alone for me during a pandemic where I'm isolated, not just alone, is something that like, I can't just like decide to talk to my roommate or friends and be like, okay, I need to take a break from social media, or like go to the beach with a friend. I have to go alone and intentionally like without my phone. But then we're so connected to our phones, and like Maps is amazing.
Yeah.
Timer and GPS functions are amazing, but it also is such a gateway, right? It's like, I think of social media as like, imagine if you just gave complete uncontrolled, like unmonitored ability for everyone to do drugs. And then some people were like paid to do harder drugs than other people, and then expecting people to comprehend a battle with addiction, right? Like that's the tools that we're ingraining. And again, I'm not here to be like Gen Z, get off your phone. Like I think it's great to be able to do things, but it also is like such like a gateway into just completely not knowing how to exist in a world that's not just around other influencers and famous people.
Yeah. We're all about similar age, but like, yeah, people who literally were born, and it's just like the new way of communicating. It's a really different world. And I think it's interesting. There's pros to it, there's cons to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are ways to backfire on everything, right? Like I feel like these conversations could be had about the world of globalization or travel, you know? It's like you get to see people around the world, but then it's also like you get to just not be around people, you know? But like, so I don't think that it's like necessarily counterproductive to see this, but like like I think that the nature of how something is built and what it is built for shouldn't be removed from the fact that it has a disorienting impact, right? Like there are so many ways to have social media and not be narcissistic. I truthfully believe that. But the fact is like TikTok, Instagram, TikTok, especially in YouTube, it's like, I guess more TikTok, it's you. There's also construction outside, sorry. It's you. So one time I remember there was like an overnight live, like a 12-hour live session that creators were supposed to do for like a blackout day. And I tried doing it, and it wasn't that I couldn't stay awake, it was that I couldn't stand staring at myself on a live stream for hours. I don't think humans were meant to stare at themselves for that long of a period of time. And that's what social media does. That's what media sharing does. And I was doing it and I was just like, wow, I'm literally just looking at myself and I'm listening to myself. I'm having a conversation and people talk to themselves, it's fine, but it's very different. And but it would have been so much if there were a person there and I was just talking. That's fundamentally narcissism. That's a narcissistic conversation. Even if everything you have to say, people want to listen to, that's completely overriding a conversation about you. And like being a psych student, right? Like these are, like you could be the most selfless person in the world and yet being a figure and people want to listen to you makes what you have to say like more important in your eyes and other people's eyes. And then, like if Michelle Obama were standing in front of me, I would literally not speak and I just want her to be. But that would be fun. Like that is at its crux, literal like overriding of human conversation. Again, I think like that's the reason that we idolize people. Like idolatry is something that's existed for so long. Like we've always held people up to higher standards, and there's a good thing. The role models are great. Like if I were in a room with my role model, I'd want to hear from them. It's not saying like you shouldn't be heard, but there's a difference between like going and giving a speech or doing a press conference and living every day of your life on like as if you were just like at a press conference, or as if you were being interviewed on Ellen, or as if you were in a conversation of someone who just wanted to hear you. And I think that is something that like when we learn about social conditioning, right? Like without realizing it, if you are an influencer, every day you are like conditioning into your brain, like I matter and people like me because I matter to them, which is great for confidence. Like I've become such a bad bitch because of social media. It's been so enlightening for my self-worth. Great. But it also is like, then at the end of the day, I'm like, well, I don't remember the last time that I've had a normal conversation with somebody that was in my life before COVID because of COVID, right? But also that wasn't like every podcast I'm on, every interview, it's exciting and engaging. I love talking. I've always loved talking, but it's so much more like me answering, and I think that that's something that's like, I need to take a step back from, and I understand why now you see these celebrities going like underground for years, because it's just like being someone who's supposed to matter all the time is really just profoundly not okay for the human mind if you don't want to end up being a narcissist. And it's not bad, like I think fundamentally like all actors, actresses, and artists are narcissists, but they're like creative narcissists, like, right? Like they're producing a project that embodies their confidence. Versus like social media, where as a public figure and creator, like you're the creation, like you're the project, you're the creativity. And so the narcissism has to be about you, even if you're uplifting like a bit, even if you're a caricature. It's always like your name, your username, your appearance. And some people find very, very healthy boundaries, like phenomenally healthy boundaries. And I've met with them, and some people haven't, and I'm one of those people. And I also think the pandemic makes people more likely, those people, right? There's just so much time not socializing. But I think that that's all of this was just like a dangerous storm for like the relationship with social media that I've developed and the insight into it.
Now that you have, something, did you predict any of this? Like, would you ever have thought in December of 2020 you would have this?
No, I made fun of high schoolers for having a TikTok. I didn't download it until like late March. Like it was really not, I like refused. I was so annoying. I was such a boomer. People would say like, have you seen that TikTok? And I'd be like, shut up. Like I was such a Vine person, right? And I love TikTok. It's so funny, but also it's like, and it's great. I'm grateful for what I've learned, but if I could go back and like undo it all, like from the day that I downloaded TikTok, I would.
Really?
I think an equivalent would kind of be like if you asked somebody who got into a really severe car crash and then wrote a really phenomenal article or memoir or did interviews about how inspiring it was, but they're at the end of the day still like kind of beaten up and brutalized, maybe, I don't know, lost a limb or something. At the end of the day, it's a harder life. It's a life that thinks more intentionally and it's exciting and inspiring, but like it's a life that's further away from normal. And I think at the end of the day, you can decide if you want that or not. And I think just my personal opinion is like, I would rather be normal, but like be able to contribute to like the excellence of thought, or like to with people that are really amazing, like you guys who are doing this themselves. But I'd rather work with the trailblazers than like necessarily be the one that's like the world's on my shoulders.
And I think so. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I definitely, people have different objectives, and people who find themselves in these unpredictable situations can, I think, yeah, it really depends on like who you surround yourself with, who's on your team. Because I cannot imagine, right? Yeah, like starting a company myself, and similar to you, like
Right.
being in this yourself. And I'm not saying that you are, but yeah, it's important to surround yourself with those people who understand what it's like and can sort of ground you in it, like
Mm.
ground you into your normal, like, this is okay, this is what we want to do type of thing.
And it really is just a culture shock, right? Like some people can go to a different culture and love it, and some people don't. And I think that that's how people should see social media, right? Like when I went to college, I couldn't have even fathomed what being around that amount of wealth, prestige, opportunity, and intellect would be. And
Yeah.
I flourished. It was great for me. Like it was so great. Just as much as I think if I like wasn't so happy with my life before this, I think TikTok would have been a great opportunity to create and embed an entirely new world, right? But now I'm like in this entirely new world, and I'm trying to like find my roots. And that's really difficult and challenging. But it's something like in high school, in college, like I couldn't maintain my high school life with college, but that was so fine. Like I was like, bye. I was like, I never want to speak to someone from high school again. That's so fine. I understand I'm bitter and annoying. Goodbye. I'm grateful it got me into Harvard, but I'm here. Right. And I just it was a full embrace of the new culture. Whereas like TikTok for me was just kind of like loitering around freshman year, and then just realizing like this isn't for me. It's for a lot of people, but it's not for me.
And I do think over time, like whatever you decide to do with this, with your TikTok, there will be a lot of probably like things that none of us would expect, like positive things that come out of it too, in the sense of being able to launch something else, or use your voice to really make an impact. So I think that's something that not most 22-year-olds can say.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I have like a good foundation to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know much like about any of this story before just like today, and I'm literally sitting here like in awe. Like I have so much respect for you. I don't know how I would have dealt with the last 6 months, but it's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really know either, but at least there's a digital footprint of me doing it in front of like millions of people over the past couple of months. But yeah, it's new, but it's adapting, it's learning, and it's exciting being able to like talk to other people who are doing completely different things with their lives, who like I never would have been in touch with either of you, to like reflect or to even provide insight in my own life. What I think people don't realize is so much of social media is kind of like making mistakes as you go, right? There's like this expectation of perfection of like you have to think 8 steps ahead, which some people do, but I think most people don't. And we only learn to think 10 steps ahead if you get like run over for not, right? Like that's what cancel culture has become. It's become like cancel culture was originally made to make sure that CEOs and executives were not sexually assaulting interns, and has become something that's just like if somebody says something in a way that we don't like, it's like they're a terrible person. And I think that's horrifying of a way to live online. And in understanding, like for me at least, it was like, yes, I recognized in my video like it was aggro, but it wasn't wrong, and you can apologize for the impact that it might have negatively, right? But at the end of the day, if the impact is negative because someone misunderstands what you were saying and you explain it and they still don't understand it, like that's not on you. And you need to alleviate yourself from that expectation. It just sucks when the people who don't get it are the ones who are still like, it doesn't matter, I still hate you. You know, like I don't know how the D'Amelios do it, really. Like every day a mistake of theirs is just like, I watch their YouTube videos and I'm like, oh my God, like someone's gonna get mad that she rolled her eyes here. Or like someone's gonna get mad that like she didn't appreciate this thing, right? Like, and that's so messed up because like anyone else in that situation would probably just like be a normal person. So yeah, I think the biggest is like, if you want to go into it, forgiving yourself for that, and then, you know, deciding do you like what you want to do with it, like having your agenda, which for some people is like making money, you know, make it a job, do it. For some people it's like having fun. For some people it's making an impact. And I think ultimately just like taking a step back and saying like, if I were to explain this to someone else that didn't know me, like would I or would I not be okay with it, you know? And I think that's a very important question that like I rarely asked myself, because I was like, of course, like everyone looks at activism and it's like, that's so cool. But at the end of the day, like we can look at people in admiration, but we, you know, to be someone who's admired and not like personally cared about, right? Other than just an abstract, it's a really lonely way to live life. And for me, it was unsustainable. Like I couldn't do it. I couldn't be like a role model to thousands of people around the world. And then at the end of the day, feel like I couldn't text anyone about what, you know, flavor of ice cream I wanted to get at CVS. And I think that was like a very important realization. And I think just like knowing what sort of life you want to live with social media. And like, if you want to live it, keep going forward, just like finding and setting boundaries, because it's not like a one type fits all like mode for people on social media.
That is so identical or like sort of parallel to entrepreneurship, I think too, and because it can be very, very lonely. And people, you have to plan ahead and you'll never like know what to expect. Everything is new. Every day there's a new challenge. And so, I think it's very, very in parallel with some of the challenges of entrepreneurship. And I would consider you sort of an entrepreneur as well, in the sense of, you know, forging your own way right in this whole new world. Well, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me and for chatting.
And thanks again for taking the time out of your night to talk with us. Super excited to see how you progress along the way and what the future holds for you, and we wish you the very best. Thanks guys so much for watching. We're gonna be releasing episodes weekly and we're trying to hit the bar, so we're gonna peace out. Be sure to like, subscribe, all the other things, all the social medias, comment, share, retweet, copy, paste link. Isn't that the TikTok thing? Just full send it. Get it done. Get us some likes, guys. Hope you guys enjoy.